Evening, Maggie. This is the second part of Chapter 11, the Dueling Club. I don't know if you remember that Harry Potter was dueling. Gilderoy Lockhart was demonstrating dueling with Professor Snape, and Professor Snape blew him across the room and he landed on the floor. And then Harry Potter was dueling with Malfoy, Draco Malfoy. And Malfoy conjured a snake out of his wand, and the snake doubled in size when Harry's initial spell backfired, or when Gilderoy Lockhart's spell backfired. And the snake went for Seamus Finnegan or someone like that, and then Harry told the snake to get away, but he told the snake in snake language, which is called Parselmouth, is what he said. But what he thought he said was get away from him. But that's how it came out. Which is get away from him in snake language. So everyone thinks that Harry is now the heir to Slytherin, the one who opened the Chamber of Secrets, and the one who's causing all these people to get petrified, frozen, and sent up to Madame Pomfrey, the school nurse. So I read on. In the second week of December, Professor McGonagall came around as usual, collecting names for those who would be staying at school for Christmas. Harry, Ron and Hermione signed their list. They heard that Draco Malfoy was staying. Unfortunately, the potion that they had was only half finished. They still... Hang on, have I read this? No, I haven't. The potion, this is the Polyjuice potion that changes them into someone else. They still needed the bicorn horn and the boomslang skin, and the only place they were going to get it was from Professor Snape's private stores. Oh, hang on, I have read this. This is the bit where Harry chucks the firework into Goyle's potion and it explodes and everyone gets swollen up, and while Snape is deliberately fixing them, Hermione Granger goes and steals the potions from Snape's private store of ingredients so that they can make the Polyjuice potion. So, by the next morning, however, the snow had begun in the night and had turned into a blizzard so thick that the last herbology lesson of the term was cancelled. So Harry couldn't go and see Justin Finch-Fletchley, who the snake was attacking, and explained that he was just telling him to call the snake off. Professor Sprout wanted to fit socks and scarves on the mandrakes, a tricky operation she would entrust to no one else, now that it was so important for the mandrakes to grow quickly and revise Mrs. Norris and Colin Creevey, who were frozen in the school infirmary, in the school hospital. Harry fretted about this next to the fire in the Gryffindor common room, while Ron and Hermione used their time off to play a game of wizard chess. "For heaven's sake, Harry," said Hermione, exasperated, as one of Ron's bishops wrestled her knight off his horse and dragged him off the board, "go and find Justin if it's so important to you." So Harry got up and left through the porthole, wondering where Justin might be. The castle was darker than it usually was in daytime because of the thick swirling grey snow at every window. Shivering, Harry walked past classrooms where lessons were taking place, catching snatches of what was happening within. Professor McGonagall was shouting at someone who, by the sound of it, had turned his friend into a badger. Resisting the urge to take a look, Harry walked on by, thinking that Justin might just be using his free time to catch up on some work, and decided to check the library first. A group of Hufflepuffs who should have been in herbology, were indeed sitting at the back of the library, but they didn't seem to be working much. Between the long lines of high bookshelves, Harry could see their heads were close together, and they were having what looked like an absorbing conversation. He couldn't see whether Justin was among them. He was walking towards them when something of what they were saying met his ears, and he paused to listen. "So anyway," a stout boy was saying, "I told Justin to hide up in our dormitory. I mean to say, if Potter's marked him down as his next victim, it's best if he keeps a low profile for a while. Of course, Justin's been waiting for something like this to happen ever since he let slip to Potter he was Muggle-born. Justin actually told him he'd been down for Eton. That's not the kind of thing you bandy about with the Slytherins' air on the loose, is it?" "You definitely think it is Potter, then, Ernie?" said a girl with blonde pigtails anxiously. "Hannah," said the stout boy solemnly, "he's a Parselmouth. Everyone knows that's the mark of a dark wizard. Have you ever heard of a decent one who could talk to snakes? They called Slytherin himself Serpent Tongue." There was some heavy murmuring at this, and Ernie went on. "Remember what was written on the wall? Enemies of the air beware. Potter had some sort of run-in with Filch. Next thing we know, Filch's cat's attacked. That first year, Creevy was annoying Potter at the Quidditch match, taking pictures of him while he was lying in the mud. Next thing we know, Creevy's been attacked." "He always seems so nice, though," said Hannah, uncertainly. "And well, he's the one who made you-know-who disappear. He can't be all bad, can he?" Ernie lowered his voice mysteriously. The Hufflepuffs bent closer, and Harry edged nearer so he could hear Ernie's words. "No one knows how he survived the attack by you-know-who. I mean to say, he was only a baby when it happened. He should have been blasted into smithereens. Only a really powerful dark wizard could have survived a curse like that." He dropped his voice until it was barely more than a whisper, and said, "That's probably why you-know-who wanted to kill him in the first place. Didn't want another Dark Lord competing with him. I wonder what other powers Potter's been hiding." Harry couldn't take it any more. Clearing his throat loudly, he stepped out from behind the bookshelves. If he hadn't been feeling so angry, he would have found the sight that greeted him funny. Every one of the Hufflepuffs looked as though they had been petrified by the sight of him, and the colour was draining out of Ernie's face. "Hello," said Harry. "I'm looking for Justin Finch-Fletchley." The Hufflepuffs' worst fears had clearly been confirmed. They all looked fearfully at Ernie. "What do you want with him?" said Ernie. "I wanted to tell him what really happened with that snake at the Dueling Club," said Harry. Ernie bit his white lips, and then, taking a deep breath, said, "We were all there. We saw what happened." "Then you noticed that after I spoke to it, the snake backed off?" said Harry. "All I saw," said Ernie stubbornly, though he was trembling as he spoke, "was you speaking Parseltongue and chasing the snake towards Justin." "I didn't chase it at him," Harry said, his voice shaking with anger. "It didn't even touch him." "It was a very near miss," said Ernie, "and in case you're getting ideas," he added hastily, "I might tell you that you can trace my family back through 9 generations of witches and warlocks, and my blood's as pure as anyone's, so—" "I don't give a care what sort of blood you've got," said Harry fiercely. "Why would I want to attack Muggle-borns?" "I've heard you hate those Muggles you live with," said Ernie swiftly. "It's not possible to live with the Dursleys and not hate them," said Harry. "I'd like to see you try it." He turned on his heel and stormed out of the library, earning himself a reproving glare from Madame Pince, the librarian, who was polishing the gilded cover of a large spellbook. Harry blundered up the corridor, barely noticing where he was going. He was in such a fury. The result was that he walked into something very large and solid, which knocked him backwards onto the floor. "Oh, hello, Hagrid," Harry said, looking up. Hagrid's face was entirely hidden by a woolly, snow-covered balaclava, but it couldn't possibly be anyone else, as he filled most of the corridor with his moleskin overcoat. A dead rooster was hanging from one of his massive gloved hands. "All right, Harry," he said, pulling up the balaclava so he could speak. "Why aren't you in class?" "Cancelled," said Harry. "What are you doing in here?" Hagrid held up the limp rooster. "Second one killed this term," he explained. "It's either foxes or a blood-sucking bugbear, and I need the headmaster's permission to put a charm around the hen coop." He peered more closely at Harry from under his thick snow-flecked eyebrows. "You sure you're all right, Harry?" "Yeah, you look all hot and bothered." Harry couldn't bring himself to repeat what Ernie and the rest of the Hufflepuffs had been saying about him. "It's nothing," he said. "I'd better get going, Hagrid. It's Transfiguration next, and I've got to pick up my books." He walked off, his mind still full of what Ernie had been saying about him. Justin's been waiting for something like this to happen ever since he let slip to Potter he was Muggle-born. Harry stamped up the stairs and turned along another corridor, which was particularly dark. The torches had been extinguished by a strong icy draught that was blowing through a loose window pane. He was halfway down the passage when he tripped headlong over something lying on the floor. He turned to squint at what he'd fallen over and felt as though his stomach had dissolved. Justin Finch Fletchley was lying on the floor, rigid and cold, and a look of shock frozen on his face. His eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, and that wasn't all. Next to him was another figure, the strangest sight Harry had ever seen. It was nearly Headless Nick, no longer pearly white and transparent, but black and smoky, floating immobile and horizontal, 6 inches off the floor. His head was half off, and his face wore an expression of shock identical to Justin's. Harry got to his feet, his breathing fast and shallow, his heart doing a kind of drum roll against his ribs. He looked wildly up and down the deserted corridor and saw a line of spiders scuttling as fast as they could away from the bodies. The only sounds were the muffled voices of teachers from the classes on either side. He could run and no one would ever know that he'd been there, but he couldn't just leave them lying here. He had to get help. Would anyone believe he hadn't had anything to do with this? He stood there panicking. A door right next to him opened with a bang, and Peeves the poltergeist came shooting out. "Why, it's Potty wee Potter," cackled Peeves, knocking Harry's glasses askew as he bounced past him. "What's Potter up to? Why is Potter lurking?" Peeves stopped halfway through a mid-air somersault upside down. He spotted Justin and nearly Headless Nick. He flipped the right way up, filled his lungs, and before Harry could stop him, screamed, "Attack! Attack! Another attack! No mortal or ghost is safe! Run for your lives! Attack!" Crash, crash, crash. Door after door flew open along the corridor, and people flooded out. For several long minutes there was a scene of such confusion that Justin was in danger of being squashed, and people kept standing in nearly Headless Nick. Harry found himself pinched against the wall as the teachers shouted for quiet. Professor McGonagall came running, followed by her own class, one of whom still had black and white striped hair. She used her wand to set off a loud bang which restored silence, and ordered everyone back into their classes. No sooner had the scene cleared somewhat than Ernie the Hufflepuff arrived panting on the scene. "Caught in the act!" Ernie yelled, his face stark white, pointing his finger dramatically at Harry. "That will do, Macmillan," said Professor McGonagall sharply. Peeves was bobbing overhead, now grinning wickedly, surveying the scene. Peeves always loved chaos. As the teachers bent over Justin and nearly Headless Nick, examining them, Peeves broke into song. "Oh, Potter, you rotter, oh, what have you done? You're killing off students, you think it is fun." "That's enough, Peeves," barked Professor McGonagall, and Peeves zoomed away backwards with his tongue out at Harry. Justin was carried up to the hospital wing by Professor Flitwick and Professor Sinistra of the astronomy department. But nobody seemed to know what to do for nearly Headless Nick. In the end, Professor McGonagall conjured a large fan out of thin air, which she gave to Ernie with instructions to waft nearly Headless Nick up the stairs. This Ernie did, fanning Nick along like a silent black hovercraft. This left Harry and Professor McGonagall all together. "This way, Potter," she said. "Professor," said Harry at once. "I swear I didn't." "This is out of my hands, Potter," said Professor McGonagall curtly. They marched in silence around a corner, and she stopped before a large, extremely ugly stone gargoyle. "Lemon Drop," she said. This was evidently a password, because the gargoyle suddenly sprang to life, hopped aside as the wall behind him split in two. Even full of dread for what was coming, Harry couldn't fail to be amazed. Behind the wall was a spiral staircase, that was moving smoothly upward like an escalator. As he and Professor McGonagall stepped onto it, Harry heard the wall had closed behind them. They rose upward in circles, higher and higher, until at last, slightly dizzy, Harry saw a gleaming oak door, ahead with a brass knocker in the shape of a griffin. He knew now where he was being taken. This must be where Dumbledore lived. So, that's the end of chapter 11. Chapter 12 is called the Polyjuice Potion, and this is the potion that changes you into the person that you want to be, and you have to get something of theirs, like hair, bogies, toenails, fingernails, and drop some into the potion that you're going to swallow, and it turns you into them for an hour or two. Or that's the plan. We don't know if it'll work or not, do we? Anyway, I will record the Polyjuice Potion for you tomorrow, so that you will have it tomorrow night, Tuesday night. But you might just have listened to chapter 11, so that's probably enough. Anyway, good night, love. It was nice talking to you today.